everyone, I'm Becca, a second year student nurse at the University of Nottingham. Welcome back to my channel, and if you've never seen a video of mine, then welcome. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about my personal experiences in interventional radiology. First, a little disclaimer, I will not be naming any of the hospital trusts, any of the hospital names, any of the ward names, or any of the names of the staff for confidentiality reasons. If you're familiar with the University of Nottingham and where we work, then you probably will be able to guess as to where I'm talking about, but I am just not going to name them at all. But have fun guessing. So I was at this placement from March to April 2019, and it was a 4-week placement. I was 19 for the entire time that I was there. Before I went on this placement, I was very interested by the word radiology because I was like, that's very exciting. Maybe I'll get to do some stuff with x-rays and stuff like that. But I had absolutely no idea what interventional radiology is. So a little bit of background, interventional radiology is the theatre where they do any procedure that needs to be assisted by an x-ray or an ultrasound. So that's stuff like putting in drains, doing fistuloplasties, cardiac cath labs where they put in stents. That's all to do with interventional radiology as well. So yeah, that's what interventional radiology is, and it was quite exciting actually. I was very interested when I went because it was obviously my first time in theatres. It was very exciting. So I am going to go through the good stuff and the not so good stuff of this placement and give it an overall rating at the end. The good stuff of this placement was I got to wear scrubs every day. So I literally didn't have to wear my student nurse uniform for once. And I mean, the student nurse uniform is not too bad. I like the one from my university. The colour is great, but they're not the most comfortable all the time, especially on the wards when they get really hot. You can get really overheated really quickly. But I got to wear scrubs every day, and if anyone's ever worn scrubs, it's like wearing your pyjamas to work. It's great. They're so comfy, they're so lightweight. And also, in the theatres, they always had the aircon blasting, and if anyone knows me, I would prefer to be cold than to be hot. So being able to wear like basically pyjamas and then have the aircon blasting all day was the best thing for me. I absolutely loved being in the theatres. And then obviously, being in theatre, it was a different environment, which was great. I got to learn a lot of new stuff, a lot of new terminology. I got to learn how they work in that kind of theatre. And I got to work with a lot of different people. So radiographers, radiologists, I got to work with student doctors and nurses, scrub nurses, non-scrub nurses, and then obviously they have their own recovery as well. So I got to work with the recovery nurses as well. And this particular one had 2 theatres, so they always had, both of the theatres were full, and they'd have different lists for the different days. This placement being a theatre environment, there was a lot of aseptic non-touch technique. So again, if I was to have that exam in second year, I think I would have nailed it, because from my first placement with the student nurse helping me and then this one, everything is aseptic, I think I would have nailed it. On this placement, I also got to go to 2 insight visits, one to haematology day case. I followed a patient from their admission to haematology day case. They came up to interventional radiology to get a PICC line put in, and then they went back to haematology to have their red blood cell exchange because they had a disease called sickle cell disease. So I got to learn about sickle cell, and I also got to learn about the procedure of putting in a PICC line, and then also the procedure of the red blood cell exchange themselves. And I loved working in haematology day case, so I would actually consider working there when I qualify because I loved it so much and the team were great. And I got to work with some of the nurses that actually gave my uncle, not my biological uncle, his chemotherapy when he got cancer. So I loved being there. I also got to go to the cardiac cath labs, which was really interesting because cardiology is an area that I've always been interested in. I got to see some stents being put in, and I got to see one of the messiest cardiologists ever. That's what they call him, because whenever he does surgery, it gets messy, and trust and believe, it got messy. I was the one who was stood on the theatre table trying to get the blood off the screen. He flicks it everywhere. I got told at the beginning, stand back. And that I did, and then I was safe. But yeah, that was really super fun, and I loved cardiology, and being able to go to the cath labs was amazing. Being able to see how they work differently to the main interventional radiology theatres, but then also the similarities as well. And I actually got to go with one of the radiographers that I'd already worked with, so I was super comfortable because I already knew him. On to the not so great stuff on this placement. So obviously being theatres and they have their lists, it would get very repetitive because on a Monday morning, for example, they would have fistuloplasties and they'd probably do about 5 in a row. And then next Monday, they would have fistuloplasties and there'd be like 5 or 6 in a row. So I got to see a lot of the same stuff. It meant that I kind of knew what was going on, but it also got kind of boring because I was just seeing the same stuff over and over. That's why I used to flick between the two theatres, but the second theatre always had PIC lines and Hickman lines going in, so it was kind of repetitive on both of the theatres, so I would spend some time in recovery as well when I got super bored, because especially it being in the theatre environment and I was only there for 4 weeks, I'd never worked in theatre before, I couldn't really get involved. There was a lot of watching, so I did just stand there and watch a lot of the time. So when I got bored, I would go to recovery, because at least in recovery I could actually do something. I know how to take obs, I know how to ask a patient if they want a drink, I know how to do that kind of nursing stuff. So whenever I got bored, I would just go to recovery and just bosh it out in there, because I just knew what I was doing there. Whereas actually in the theatres I'd just be standing and watching. Therefore, I didn't actually feel like I learnt an awful lot there. I did get to learn about some new different pieces of equipment and how the theatre works, but some of the procedures that they did there, I'm still not entirely sure what they're for or how they did it, because a lot of the radiologists were not very good at explaining what they were doing. It wasn't all of the doctors. Some of the doctors were great. I had some doctors who were really great with me, and they went step by step telling me how everything worked. They even showed me the equipment before and after and was telling me how it all works inside the body, how they do it. And then they'd get the radiographer to point stuff out on the screen saying this is that. However, some of them were not. There was actually one doctor who it had to be silent in the theatre, the radio got turned off, and you weren't allowed to speak unless he asked you something. And if he asked you something, it was probably very vague as well, so you were running around the theatre trying to find out what was going on. So it wasn't great. Also, my sign-off mentor went on annual leave during my time there, so I don't know why she was allocated as my sign-off mentor, but she was. So I actually only worked with her twice, so I was very nervous when it came to being signed off because she didn't really know me at all. So that wasn't great. And to be fair, I should have just asked for a different sign-off mentor at the time, but I didn't, because I didn't know any better. Overall, my rating for this placement would be a 7 out of 10. If it wasn't for the insight visits, it might have been a 6 out of 10. I enjoyed it, especially for the first week or two, but then I did get quite bored. So it was nice that I got to take my insight visits and get to go and see somewhere else. Okay everyone, so that's it for this week's video. If you enjoyed hearing about my time at Interventional Radiology, make sure to give this video a thumbs up down below and hit the subscribe button so you can hear about the rest of my placement experiences, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss a single one of those. I will see you guys next week for another video on my experiences in the community. See you later, bye!